right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I know there's a keynote going on. Hopefully, more folks will join us shortly. So in this session, I'm going to share a little bit of our journey of building together a Lakehouse at DoorDash, and part of it is for supporting the data scientist team. Our agenda is, first I'll share the use cases at DoorDash, including the analytics as well as data science. And then share about a story. How do we end up with partnering with Databricks? What's the process we went through to do that? And then how are things going right now? And then wrap it up with a summary. Before we go in, just a bit about myself. So I'm currently with DoorDash, leading the ML platform team. Been there about 2 years. And also share a little bit about my background. I've been fortunate enough to work at companies at various stages of the technology evolutions, starting out with the cloud technology, if you remember, like many, many years ago. So I started with Netflix. That's when they decided to move everything to the cloud. It was a huge decision, but it looks like it worked out. And then I moved on to join LinkedIn. That was the beginning of the big data technology revolution, again, many, many years ago. And then I went to Uber a little bit to work more on the streaming related projects there. And I came back to LinkedIn and then switched gear a little bit of focusing more on the ML infrastructure side. And then now I'm exclusively focusing on that at DoorDash. So in terms of our use cases, involves analytics and data science. On the analytics side, I would say it's fairly typical use cases involving metrics, reporting, dashboards, and such. I think what's unique is, some part of it's unique is the data sets that we work with for DoorDash business, like the order deliveries and user interaction. So those data sets are specific, but other data sets are, I would say, a bit fairly common with other internets and e-commerce companies. And the needs for moving data around efficiently is also, I would say, as part of a typical data infrastructure. Make sure that data flows on a daily basis with reliability, freshness, and all that. So including ingestion, ETL, and data engineering, like most other companies, plays a big part of this as well, making sure the data sets are clean, right, reliable, and available for business to access. On top of that are the operational metrics, which are very, very important for the company to know what's going on, to detect failure scenarios, and to react to them if needed. And the other big use case for us is to support the data science and machine learning team, which is that I'm mainly responsible for. And the use cases around that is how to generate features, create features at scale and efficiently. And also for data scientists to use our Spark and Databricks environment to do model explorations and trainings and all that good stuff that they do as a data scientist. So to share a little more context in terms of how our data flows at DoorDash, so I thought it would be interesting to share a bit about this. So I'm going to start with the top. Our users interact with DoorDash in multiple means, including the mobile devices, from the apps to iPads and web browsers. So we have customers like you and me, could be like ordering food or browsing for restaurants, for dinners and such. And then we have dashers, the people that are delivering food to us. They definitely use our app for navigating and know how to get to the restaurant to pick up the food or deliver it to our houses and such. And then we have merchants, meaning restaurant owners, managing the orders, managing the inventories, food preparations, and all that. So all those interactions start at the top, will flow into a company through the proxy that I see here. So that proxy support the external traffics as well as internal traffics. And all those interactions, events are routed through our Kafka clusters, so we're a big Kafka fan. I'm sure many, many companies are as well. And then for data movement, we have databases like most company online databases to support our businesses. So, we use some means for CDC, capture data change technologies, to make sure that data is available on the data warehouse or data lake for the business to do analysis on. So all that going through a central pipeline to Kafka. And then behind that, we need some kind of streaming computation engine. In this case, it's Apache Flink that helps move those data into our, I call it data store, which is a composite of multiple technologies behind its storage engines, right, including our data warehouse and our data lakes. And from there, there's a lot of things that will fan off from there in terms of for doing dashboarding, for business to figure out how the orders are going for a particular week, for example. And then another big part of that is leveraging Spark or Databricks to do a lot of the use for the computation that I mentioned earlier, for analytics purposes, for data science purposes. And those jobs could be write the data back to our data store. And some of those might be for real-time, some of the real-time analytics. We leverage Pinot to generate those and power some of the external applications. And more specifically for machine learning, some of our features or data, we compute for features for machine learning purposes. Our feature store is based on Redis at the moment, so we have the ability to move those features onto our feature store that will be used at prediction time. Okay, so the big question, some of you might be wondering, why Databricks? Why did we partner with Databricks? Like most other young, fast-growing companies, it's a journey in terms of building out our data infrastructure. And it's always interesting to hear about other companies' story. How did they evolve? How did they get started? Each one is unique in a way, depending on what's going on, the company culture, and all that good stuff. For us, about 3 or 4 years ago, that's when DoorDash decided to heavily invest in building our data infrastructure. Before that was focusing on how to survive, right? So once the company becomes somewhat successful, that it makes sense for the company to start investing heavily in other pieces of the company to prepare for the next phase of the growth. So we started out with the data warehouse, which makes a lot of sense because business people need access to data for their day-to-day operations. And we settled on Snowflake. So it's a good start, but as the company grows, as the data volumes grows, as the needs changes, then that's not going to be sufficient. I'm sure most of you know that, right? So that's when we started thinking about, the computational engine of how to compute these massive amount of data for other use cases besides business analytics. And also thinking about the journey to build our data lake or Lakehouse. So Databricks come into a picture for all those reasons. And as part of the evaluation process, like most other companies, we use a set of criteria for deciding what vendors to go with. Cost, obviously an obvious one, but not only in dollar amount, but also the human costs. How much would it cost if you were to build out something similar to what Databricks provides? And timing also another big piece of this, because if you have all the time in the world, then you can have a lot of options. But if the internal customers are banging at your door that they need something for them to do their work, so that influences the choices that you have as well. And risks, certainly another high important topic there. I think we all know that Databricks is a leader in this space of providing a host of solutions. So for us, we don't see that at all. And also the ability to keep up with the growth of the company, another big factor there. So all those factors come together, and we did an evaluation, and we got Databricks quickly up and running, so that, through the POC process and so on. And that's when we started to partner with Databricks about, I'd say, two plus years now at this point. And then in the last couple of years, we really thinking about building out the data infrastructure in a holistic manner, and that's where the Lakehouse story or the data lakes come into our picture. So we want to think about the efficiency and cost, because now the volume of data has steadily increased. The usage has been steadily increased. Companies are growing a lot. So all those factors come together that forces us to think about efficiency and costs. And as like most out of the data infrastructure team and company, we want to make sure the data is available for everyone in the company to use, because we believe data will drive innovations across many, many teams. And as part of that story, understanding where the data are, how that data is generated, obviously becoming more important as well. So the discovery lineage, and then the use cases for batch and streaming, that's always an interesting story or discussion point. So yeah, streaming ingestion, I think I shared earlier about how we use Kafka. I think that helped us a lot for ingestion. Batch is still very much a big part of our story. So our Lakehouse story, the way we think about it, these are the inputs into how we think about putting together a Lakehouse at DoorDash. So how is it going now, our journey 2.5 years later? Like I mentioned, the growth of DoorDash over the last couple of years is tremendous. And I think Databricks helps quite a bit in that aspect, because we're able to scale with the growth of the data volume, with the growth of the companies. So with Databricks, we can focus on what's more important to the business, what the needs are, than the investment in building out something like what Databricks provides. And we were able to support a diverse set of teams in the company, right? We started out with the data scientist team as the main customers, but now has increased beyond many, many other teams inside the company. So it's quite easy to support that as a hosted solution. And I think the other part that I really like is the ability to scale quickly and easily without a whole lot of effort. And I'm sure many of you know how to, if you are a Databricks customer, I'm sure you recognize that as well. I think management of the whole infrastructure, it requires a little bit of effort, but I think if we were to build something from scratch, that probably will require much more effort and engineering time and resources as well. Keep in mind, the data infrastructure team is still a smaller organization of the overall company. So any help we can get is definitely good. How do we think about what the impact that Databricks is bringing to us? And for me, it's about productivities. We all want our customers, internal customers, right, our data scientists, our data analysts, data engineers to be productive at what they need to do, whatever that might be. And I think tremendously Databricks helps, or the whole Spark and Databricks hosted solution helps with this. And then same thing with scaling. As we have more use cases on the machine learning side, feature computation is now one of the dominant workload on Databricks for computing features, large volumes of those on a daily basis, and managing them and orchestrate them. Another aspect that's kind of a surprise for me as we're starting to use Databricks more for data science workload is leveraging this job scheduling capability, the ability to launch clusters programmatically. That's something that I didn't anticipate on day one. As Databricks capabilities is more mature and increase, some of these capabilities become really, really useful for us as a small team of engineers. And the last part is, like I mentioned, it's all about allowing us to focus on what we need to do as the core competencies that we want to provide for our customer, whether that's data scientists. It's all about helping them to be efficient and productive without having to worry about underlying, all these intricacy of building a cluster or moving logs around or whatever that might be. So it allows us to focus on those more. All right, what's the next step in future plan? As the company moving to the next phase, like most other company, efficiency and costs is become front and center. So reducing or knowing where the cost goes, the cost attribution is a big important topic. And the other part is we started out with like, I don't know, the first version or the previous version of DoorDash or Databricks architecture. Now we're moving on to a new architecture. And like most migration is it takes time and effort. So we love to get over that hump. And then moving on, there's other technologies that we want to leverage. MLflow, part of our data science use cases for experiment tracking. Certainly, it's an open source project. Certainly, you can manage it yourself, but it's part of the offering, so it's very easy for us to adopt that as a starting point without having to invest in a lot of infrastructure, time, and then to support new use cases that we're anticipating for our data scientist team of natural language processing, computer vision use cases. So we're going to need to expand our infrastructure as well as figure out how to do that on the Databricks platform. All right, that's my journey, the DoorDash journey, and hopefully it's somewhat useful for the folks here. And that's the end of my talk. And we have about 7 minutes for any questions. It looks like it's not yet.
Is that better? All
Yes.
right. For the folks online. So thank you for the talk. So I had a question around lineage. So I understand data lineage through Databricks as the data flows into the lake. But when you have a different technology for the warehouse, I believe that you have Snowflake, how do you then maintain that lineage as new metrics are built on the warehouse, as the new KPIs are built on the warehouse? And so how do you do that?
So if I heard correctly, the question is about lineage, data lineage. How do you track that as the data come from different sources and so on? Is that fair to say?
Specifically, to the warehouse.
From the lake to the warehouse. Yeah. Okay. Specifically from the lake to the warehouse. But I'll make that a little bit more general. I think the data lineage from sources to from the top source all the way flow down to where you're going to actually store the data. Yeah, that's a great question, and lineage certainly has becoming a hot topic for business people to understand. If some data set went wrong, how do we know where the data is supposed to come from, right? So the way we think about that is through a data catalog solution. And that requires us to build, this is the part I would love for as an industry, how do we solve that to make just plug and play? But it's still a little bit of an engineering work to actually go and extract information from the sources as part of your ETL process. Because if you use some kind of orchestration technology like Airflow, whatever that is, right? It has details about where the source of the data is in your feature computation framework, whatever, or data computation framework, whatever. So you still need a bit of work to go and extract that out and then have a way to collect all that information, lineage information together into a single place and use the data catalog, many solutions out there right now, to visualize that and to show that to whoever is interested in the lineage of the data. Does that help?
Are you looking at Unity Catalog at this point? Are you guys thinking about Unity Catalog as a solution for that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
But similar solution like that, I think, will be very, very helpful for the industry.
Okay.
Hey, Axel Dahl from Zoom. Great talk, thank you. I saw in your architecture slide that you had Flink, taking that from Kafka and storing that into your data store. Was there a reason that you used Flink over Databricks or Apache Spark or?
Yeah, good question. So the question is why Flink versus other technologies like Spark or whatever that might be. Oftentimes, I think at this point, the streaming technology has matured tremendously over the last 3 to 4 years, right? All these solutions are very, very capable of doing most of what we need to do. So I think for us, I think like most things, it's all about, are you more of a vanilla guy or a chocolate person, ice cream kind of thing, right? And also the people that's involved in making decisions as well. I think all those factors come together in deciding a particular piece of technology. So for us specifically, the folks that were involved in making that decision had a lot of Flink experience. And if they had a lot of Spark streaming experience, probably will be Spark streaming. So that's for us, that's our story.
How are we doing on time, Pete?
1 minute and 45 seconds.
Okay. It's all yours.
Hi. So I did not see Snowflake. I did not see Snowflake in the current architecture. Is that right?
It is on the. It is there. It is our data warehouse. It still play a big part of our data infrastructure.
So between like use cases, like is like Lakehouse more for like ingestion and then Snowflake more for like surfacing, like data analyst and BI, or how?
Yeah. So we still in this evolution journey. Our Snowflake is mainly for data warehousing purposes. Initially, it's being used as kind of a centralized place, but we want to move it to a state where it's used for what it's good for, right? For analytics purposes, for business use cases, curated data sets, clean for business people to consume for dashboarding purposes. That's our end goal. That's what we want to get to. But it's still a big part of our data infrastructure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Heen. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending.